Hi, Teaching Kitchen Collaborative. I'm Jennifer Masa. I'm the Director of Research and wanted to offer up once a quarter some thoughts from the TKC on either a nutrition or research topic that's come up in the news. So, to get us started, we thought that we would give you some of our takeaways from the dietary guidelines that were just released. I know many of you have heard many commentaries and takeaways, but we wanted to let you know how we are thinking about these as we think about our teaching kitchen programming. Dietary guidelines are released once every 5 years, and the main intention of them is to help with federally assisted programming that deals with nutrition to help guide clinical practice as well as other public health policy. And the main messaging from the recent guidelines that were just released is to eat real food. This message reflects the growing concern that the American diet today has more than half of the calories consumed coming from ultra processed foods. And the new guidelines aim to shift this towards whole foods and away from highly processed foods, which are the main drivers of chronic disease. For the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative members, these guidelines are particularly important because culinary education helps to translate nutrition science into everyday behavior change. So I'd like to highlight 5 takeaways from the new guidelines and what they mean for our teaching kitchen programs. The first takeaway, eat real food and reduce highly processed food. This is a central theme that we see throughout all of the messaging of the new GGA. The previous guidelines focused heavily on individual nutrients like sugar or sodium. This edition focuses more broadly on diet quality and food processing. Highly processed foods, as we all know, include sugary beverages, packaged snacks, refined grains, and ready-to-eat meals. These foods now account for 53% of calories consumed by adults and 62% of the calories consumed by children in the US. The guidelines now are recommending replacing these foods with vegetables and fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, fish, and minimally processed protein foods. How does this translate and how is this important for our teaching kitchen programs? Well, teaching kitchens can help make the shift by teaching people how to cook with whole ingredients, how to prepare meals from scratch, how to build healthy meals that fit into real schedules, and how to make meals that are delicious and we want to eat and our children want to eat. The second takeaway is added sugar remains a major target, and the new guidelines take a stronger stance on added sugar and state that no amount of added sugar is recommended as part of a healthy diet. They recommend limiting added sugar intake even further than the previous guidelines. One of the biggest sources of added sugar is sugar-sweetened beverages. For example, a 12-ounce soda contains roughly 10 teaspoons of sugar. And sugary drinks are associated with obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, some of our biggest chronic disease issues that we have in the States. Experts emphasize that when you compare soda to alternatives such as water, coffee, or tea, the alternative is always the healthier option. How does this translate into importance for our teaching kitchen programs? We should be promoting water and unsweetened beverages, demonstrating naturally sweetened ingredients like fruit, and teaching kitchen participants how to build flavor with spices and citrus within our beverages. The third takeaway is the DGA's update on alcohol. So the recent guidelines change how alcohol consumption is discussed. Previously, the DGAs said up to 1 drink per day for women and up to 2 drinks per day for men were healthy limits. The new guidelines remove these specific limits and instead focus on broader advice. The main message now is consume less alcohol for better health. The guidelines emphasize that there is no amount of alcohol consumption that is completely risk-free, and that there are individual groups who should avoid alcohol completely, including pregnant women and those under the legal drinking age. It's also important to remember that drinking and alcohol, they have a complicated risk profile. So for some, it helps reduce risk of cardiovascular disease, but also can increase risk of cancer. So it is an individualized recommendation, and folks should talk to their primary care doctor to understand if there is a safe amount of alcohol for you. How does this translate into importance for teaching kitchen programming? We should remember to always promote water as the healthiest drink option and encourage low sugar drinks. In addition, when we're talking about alcohol within our cooking programs, we should encourage folks to talk with their primary care doctor because there are individual risk factors depending on your personal history. Takeaway number 4. There is some confusion around the messaging of saturated fats within the DGAs. The new guidelines still recommend to keep saturated fat below 10% of your daily calories. This is similar to the DGA recommendations in the past. However, there are some in the public health sphere who are concerned about some of the messaging within the visual upside down pyramid that has been produced by HHS for the DGAs for this current set of guidelines. The graphic promotes steak, butter, cheese, and whole milk. And if we consume those foods in the quantity suggested, we would be above the 10% saturated fat intake. Scientific research consistently shows us that replacing saturated fats with unsaturated fats from plant oil, nuts, seeds, and fish improves health in a whole bunch of different domains. And so, what we have to remember is what are we eating instead of our certain food groups? So, if we replace high fat dairy with healthier plant oils, nuts, and seeds, we have poorer health outcomes. However, if we think about low or no fat dairy, there potentially is benefit to having a fuller fat dairy as far as some outcomes such as obesity. So the main takeaways for our Teaching Kitchen programming is to remember that cooking with plant oils instead of butter will lead for a healthier outcome. We should incorporate nuts, seeds, and fish for the healthiest types of fats, and we should prepare balanced meals that support cardiovascular health. Our final takeaway is that protein quality matters more than protein quantity. So the new DGAs have come out with a higher amount of protein recommended universally across the population, from 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Many experts emphasize that most Americans already consume adequate amounts of protein, and what matters more is the source of protein. So a 4-ounce steak contains about 33 grams of protein, but also contains saturated fat, which has some inflammatory components as well as heme iron, which can create inflammation within the body. However, a cup of lentils provides protein, fiber, and almost no saturated fat. In addition, we have the environmental considerations of producing both foods, and beef has a higher tax on the environment, where lentils is an environmentally friendly food to produce. Research consistently shows us that plant proteins and fish are associated with better long-term health outcomes than diets in red meat. Teaching kitchens can help participants learn to cook plant-based proteins such as beans and lentils, balanced meals that include diverse protein sources, and dishes that emphasize overall diet quality. Finally, we'd like to touch on a point of why teaching kitchens matter. The guidelines alone do not change behavior. People face real barriers to healthy eating, including the cost of food, access to fresh ingredients, lack of cooking skills, and time constraints. Research from the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative multi-site trial shows us that hands-on culinary education can improve diet quality and increase cooking with whole foods. Teaching kitchens, therefore, play a critical role in turning dietary guidelines into practical skills and healthier habits. So, in closing, we'd like to highlight that the new guidelines emphasize several important principles. They prioritize whole foods, limit sugars, reduce ultra processed foods, choose healthy fats, and be mindful of beverages, including alcohol and sugary drinks. For the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative members, these guidelines reinforce the importance of culinary education as a public health tool. By helping people cook affordable meals from real ingredients, teaching kitchens translate nutrition science into everyday practice and ultimately help improve health across communities. Thanks so much for listening to our first quarterly update. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know whether you found this to be useful. We'd love to hear about more topics that you might like us to do a deep dive on. So please be in touch and let us know how we can best help serve you and your teaching kitchen programs.